This won't be the most technical lens review you're gonna see, but I have owned and used this lens a ton over the last couple of years. I can tell you this is a really easy way to upgrade to a prime lens over whatever came with your camera. It's cheap, it looks great, and it'll really take your Facebook or YouTube content to the next level. Rokinon has given us a 12mm lens that has that magical combination of a very wide field of view, so it captures all the action, a nice crisp looking subject, and even the ability to kind of blur out the background a little bit. This is the professional YouTuber look. That's why I bought it. Again, not going to be too technical, but let's cover the basic specs real quick. Rokinon/Samyang have designed this lens exclusively for mirrorless crop sensor, that is APS-C cameras. It's a 12mm prime, in other words, has a fixed focal length. It's an ultra-wide field of view with something about 110 degrees, a maximum aperture of f2.0, which is really fast and wide open, great for indoors. It's available in Sony E-mount, Canon M, Fuji X, and Micro Four Thirds, which means it'll fit a lot of Panasonic, Olympus, and even some Blackmagic cameras. This lens is manual focus and manual aperture only. There's no electronics in here. It's kind of old school in that way. Comes with a lens hood, cap, and pouch, brand new for $329 with a 1-year warranty. And for my fellow Sony users, remember that's less than half the price of the Sony 10-18 and a lot wider than the Sigma 16mm. Now let us talk about image quality, just generally speaking. I could bore you with graphs and all that other stuff, or you could just take a look at the pictures I'm about to show you that I've captured with this lens, and you can use your own eyes and go, hey, this is kind of an incredible image. For starters, this lens is way sharper than anything you're gonna get with a kit lens or even a zoom lens. Prime lenses are usually just good for that. There's very little lens flaring, so it's an easy lens to take outdoors even without a filter. The colors, as you can see, are vibrant, they're alive. I think the contrast is just right. It's not too much, it's not too little, and there's very little chromatic aberration, so you're not getting those little weird purple artifacts in the sides of the image. And despite having this really wide field of view, this lens does not have a lot of that kind of rounded distortion that happens. In case you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, you'll see this a lot in action cam, so basically any GoPro is gonna have this extremely kind of distorted, rounded look at the edges. This lens, for all of its wideness, doesn't really have much of that. So I think that this is a perfect YouTuber lens, and I want to tell you why. So I'm gonna make a distinction here between a YouTuber and a vlogger, though they are often the same thing. This is not a vlogger lens per se, but I'll explain why in a minute. Now, most content that is made for Facebook video or for YouTube requires that you're gonna talk to a camera while you're sitting down doing something or showing something. For these kinds of videos, you're gonna want a lens that can catch all the action. You're gonna want one that kind of makes a small room look bigger. And it's also really nice to have something that sort of blurs out the background and gives you that bokeh effect. It really just helps you focus on the subject in the foreground. These are all things that kind of help take your video and make it look a little bit more professional. And these are all things that you can do with this Rokinon lens pretty easily for a great price. Also common for your typical YouTuber is the fact that you're going to be a one-man or a one-woman show, which means your camera is going to be stationary, it's going to be on a tripod, and it's just going to be you kind of sitting mostly in place. That being the case, you don't need autofocus. You can step behind the camera, set the focus, set the aperture, and just forget about it. There's also a couple of side benefits that you might not think about. For starters, wide lenses are going to require that you get a little bit closer to the camera, which means it's within arm's reach. So if you have to adjust settings or play with something or even hit record, you're not getting up and down to do that. This also means if you have a microphone attached directly to your camera like I do right now, you're going to be a lot closer to it, so it's going to give you a lot better audio. I know I already said this, but for videos like this, you're really not going to need autofocus. You're going to sit down and do a lot of the content in a stationary place, and it's really not going to matter. Anyway, you get the idea. It captures all the action and it makes you look good in the process. That's why this is the YouTuber lens. Okay, so I mentioned vlogging earlier, and though a wide lens might be attractive to vloggers, I'm not sure that this is the best pick. I cannot do it today. I just can't. I've done my fair share of vlogging with this lens because it looks so good, but without autofocus, it is a lot more difficult than it needs to be. If you've got a Canon or a Sony, which are known for having really good autofocus on the cameras, it feels especially bad to not be able to use it like this. Even with a flip around screen, or an external monitor for that matter, you still have to reach and manually focus the lens every time you point it at yourself and then turn it around to point it at something else around you. Now this is especially difficult with the fast 2.0 aperture and that really shallow depth of field. Honestly, it's not impossible, like I said, but it is time consuming and can ruin your shot if you just forget to do it completely like I do, or if you just mess it up because pulling focus on a small screen is hard. If you're in a scenario where you're just the cameraman, you can put all of your energy into making sure you've got correct aperture and focus and stuff. And in that case, this lens is really going to get you results because it does look really good. But when you're doing double duty and you are both in front of and behind the camera at the same time, it's a lot to focus on. And I mean, if you're up for the challenge, it's not impossible. It just makes things a lot more difficult and probably more time consuming. Lack of autofocus and the fully manual controls may also be a deal breaker for run and gun style shooting in general. This means things like weddings, documentaries, events, or maybe if you're trying to do something narrative. The struggle is going to come with close-up shots, any shots with a fast aperture, things are going to be handheld or require a lot of motion, anything that's going to be indoor, maybe low light, all for the same reason. You're going to be messing with that focus ring the entire time. Now, before you jump down my throat, I know professional Hollywood movies, all the really expensive lenses they use on cinema cameras are all manual focus. I know, I get it. But you can't forget that there's literally an entire human being dedicated to pulling focus, and they do it remotely with something electronic so it doesn't shake the camera as they're moving the ring around. Anyway, I don't want to hear about it, okay? Having said all that though, this could be a great B camera lens because if you're just gonna put a camera off to the side on a tripod, you know, film the wedding or whatever the event is, and you just want that nice stationary wide angle, it's perfect for that. Now, there's one last really key group of people that I think are going to benefit from a lens like this, and that's anybody who wants to do some live streaming. Use the HDMI output on your camera, run it into a video capture card and put it in your PC, and all of a sudden you've got the world's best webcam hooked up to your computer. It's perfect for live streaming. Live streams, like a lot of YouTube videos, are going to have a camera that's just in one place sitting on a tripod with a more or less stationary subject sitting down to talk to the camera and maybe do something on a computer. This lens has an even wider field of view than most webcams do. So what it does in a scenario kind of like this one is add a lot more context to your shot. You can see a little bit of my computer monitor, the actual computer in the background, some stuff on my some stuff on my desk. All of this stuff is what adds a little bit of character and a little bit of story to your shot, and it's just a lot better and less boring than a straight just talking head thing that people tend to do. Personally, I think a super high quality webcam setup like this could really take a gaming channel or a Twitch stream to that next level and help you stand out. This also happens to be the perfect lens for a low budget live stream podcast like what I do. This is what I use for my little 3-person podcast. It's wide enough to get everybody in the shot, the camera's stationary, it looks nice and sharp. We're working on getting a little better background so there's something to actually blur out, but nonetheless, this has taken our podcast production to the next level for sure. Let's talk build quality. That was the worst. That was the worst. It's good. I mean, I'm not really sure what else to say. The lens is mostly made of a nice hard metal. The focus ring is really very smooth. The aperture, of course, is clicked and kind of has a nice little tactile feel to it. The whole thing just feels like a nice quality lens. Now, the lens hood and lens cap feel like cheap plastic, but whatever. I've had it for about 2 years now, and it's been tossed around a ton in different bags, and none of the markings have worn off, and it's more or less scratch-free. So some final thoughts on this lovely Samyang / Rokinon 12mm lens. Manual controls might actually be good for you. They're gonna make you learn a thing or two about film. You can kind of just think of them as the stick shift of filmmaking. A wide lens like this tends to have a bit more of an in-your-face kind of feel. I think it actually adds a little bit of energy to an otherwise static shot. This is another reason I think it's perfect for talking head stuff like this. Finally, as if I haven't said this enough, this lens is a tremendous value per how much money you're going to put into it. You'll be hard pressed to find anything that has this fast of an aperture, this nice sharp look, the low distortion, the wide angle, that doesn't cost as much as a MacBook Pro. Yeah, there is other stuff out there that's going to do better, and there's other stuff out there with autofocus, but this is a lens that really nails what it's good for. I'm giving this lens my full recommendation, and I think it's definitely worth the money if you're in the market for a wide lens. Anyway, with that said, I will link, of course, in the description below all the various versions for all the major brands like I mentioned. My final thought is, dude, you're still here, okay? You liked this, you might like other stuff I make, so you can subscribe and ring that little bell, like the video, all that YouTube jazz. But what I'm most interested in is in the comments, do you guys think this is actually a decent lens? Does anyone else out there use this? I just want to see what other people's thoughts are. I love you guys. This is goodbye.